I'm Justin Cohen. Welcome to Gurus. Imagine becoming CEO of one of the most prestigious organizations on the JSE, only to discover it was facing a R1 billion civil and criminal suit that could sink the company. Not only did Edward Kieswetter turn the business around, he did it by developing and instituting a whole new definition and practice of leadership. Today, he's president of the Da Vinci Institute School of Managerial Leadership. We're going to find out how he is revolutionizing corporate leadership across the country.
Steward leaders understand that they hold in trust the interest and the assets of another. It is not theirs. Even if you are the group CEO of a listed company, it is not your company. It is something you hold in trust. Secondly, that you must always be driven by putting service ahead of self-interest, and even when there is personal cost to it. And thirdly, that it is, and remind yourself of this every day, it is an inordinate privilege to lead, and one should never have a sense of self-entitlement. So I was confronted with resolving a long outstanding R1 billion civil claim against us and 21 criminal charges. What a daunting challenge to face on your first day. And so we did two things amongst many other things, but it started by asking a very simple question to some of my senior leaders. And that was, why are we defending ourselves? And they said, well, because we're being attacked, duh. And that's what we all do. When we are attacked, we go in defense mode. And what we don't realize that when we are in defense mode, we act out of fear and desperation without conviction. And when they said this to me, I asked, so if we are defending ourselves, tell me who will defend the pensioners? And I said, I have no interest to defend ourselves. What happened was completely unconscionable. I want to do the right thing for the pensioners. And to do this, we have to do two things. Firstly, we have to give the money back. And secondly, and when I went to my board the first time, they received this in horror and in disbelief. I said, and I want us to plead guilty to the criminal charge. And that alone could have destroyed the company. But why was I prepared to do this? Because I was not leading from fear and desperation, but from a deep conviction that if we do the right thing for those whose interest we purport to advance, that the right outcome will be achieved for all of us. And the story is well documented. What a great joy when we were able to go back and say, and because of our action, industry players came along, and in fact, we paid significantly less than what we were originally charged for. We were able to resolve the matter. We pleaded guilty, and on another, I can tell you the technical and legal issues around that, but it's more important is it was the right thing to do.
Welcome to Gurus.
Awesome, thank you.
That's got to be every CEO's nightmare. You had no idea what you were in for.
No, until it was too late. Signed already.
And in some ways, perhaps that was the advantage, wasn't it? The fact that you were coming in fresh and you weren't attached to this. But I imagine there was a lot of pressure on you as well. I mean, how did everybody feel about it? You were going to plead guilty to a criminal charge?
Well, I mean, the legal team threatened to walk out. They told the board, we disagree with your CEO, we have a winnable case. And I said, you know, winning this case is like, you know, or going to court on this matter. It's like challenging the offside rule when you've just been blown offside.
And that's it, right? Because,
and that's what we were doing.
And so you're saying whether you could win the case or not was irrelevant, right?
We had already been convicted in the court of public opinion. There was nothing we could do. In fact, our defenses were technical. They were not substantive.
And yet, how often will organizations go for the technical defense so that they can reduce the damage, where you're saying it's not just about reducing financial damage, it's about doing the right thing. But if the right thing was going to sink the company...
Well, that's where the technical understanding... I spent nights reading the law, because I was new to pension fund administration. I had to understand the risks, develop deep insight, but all of that was simply to enrich my understanding of what it needed to be done to do the right thing. And sometimes we can be too smart or too clever for our own good.
There's some very interesting research about where people are given specific rules to operate by that can be less ethical than when they don't have rules. Because within the rules, they say, as long as we can fit in the rules, that's fine. But when they don't have rules, they've got to go in on their own innate sense of what's right or wrong. And so sometimes I think the law can actually, we can look at gaming the law rather than actually doing the right thing.
I think one of the insights that I hold dear, Justin, is that just because you can do something does not mean that you ought to.
So you've really developed a framework, a leadership framework, which you teach at the Da Vinci Institute. By the way, really phenomenal to see the work that you're doing there, and I hear lots of great things. Let's talk about those 5 leadership keys. I mean, number 1, service above self, right?
I think service above self is very important. By nature, we operate as human beings by fear, fright, or flight. And therefore, it's not unusual for us to look out for ourselves, right? Self-interest is at the core, and there is nothing wrong with knowing and standing for your own interest. It is when you place that interest above everything else, regardless of the impact, that you're on a path of self-destruct. Because counterintuitively, if we act for the greater good, we act in our own interest.
Right. I mean, self-interest is at the heart of the capitalist system, right? Adam Smith. But the best way to serve yourself is to serve others.
Absolutely, and there's so many wonderful stories that shows that, and if we had more time, I could share some of those stories. But at the core of it, you have to believe that if you do what is right, and if I take care of those around me, whether it is the clients, the community, the staff that I employ, the shareholders that rely on me, if I place their interest above my own, invariably I'll be okay.
You're also talking about something which is really age-old, right? Servant-based leadership. He amongst you who wants to be great must be your servant.
Yes.
As opposed to leader as the one who gets all the booty, the wives, the country.
I think, one looks around and we see...
Reference intended.
We see many examples, okay? And we don't have to sit here and mention names. In our own country, across the world, we see leaders who have this sense of self-importance. It is all about them. And we find that unless they are being served, they don't feel satisfied. And leadership is not about being served. It is about serving.
And this was Nelson Mandela, the founder in some sense of our modern democracy. And I believe we love Nelson Mandela not because he was so great, but because he made us feel like we could be so great.
Absolutely.
Each one of us,
Absolutely.
each South African, regardless of race, religion, or gender.
It is about that.
Number 2.
So number 2 is this constant, what appears to be a paradox that leaders face. On the one hand, you need the strong conviction of what needs to be done, the task at hand. You can't go and not be clear and not be confident. I have to just say that the difference between a confident leader and an egotistical leader is a confident leader says, I can do it. An egotistical leader says, only I can do it. And so you have to be confident, you have to have strong conviction. But great leaders balance this paradoxical attribute of resolve and conviction with deep, genuine humility.
Right.
And humility takes you to a place where you are keen to listen, take on board the input of others, understand that together each achieves more. Right. It's not just about me. I have a role that's very critical, very important, but one swallow doesn't make a summer. And it is in balancing strong conviction with genuine humility that I believe produces great outcomes, such we've seen, those impactful outcomes that doesn't just create profitable companies, but impactfully changes the world.
And that's why you must be so relieved about the new leader of the free world who perfectly doesn't epitomize your second point.
I suspect,
I mean, he's literally said, I'm the only one who can fix this.
Well, I suspect that the entire election was trumped up.
Enough said. Number 3.
So number 3 is very, very important, and I learned that as a young power station manager many years ago, that in order to be trusted, you have to reciprocate trust. I can't expect you to trust me if I distrust you, Justin. And sometimes we demand trust. You cannot demand trust, you have to earn it. And so one has to work hard to demonstrate to people, and people will live up to that expectation. If you know that I trust you, you are more likely to think, I don't want to disappoint Edward, I don't want to let him down, because you have already received my affirmation and my trust. And so the best way to be trusted is to show trust.
And when you set those high expectations, people want to live up to them. When people tell me my team can never do anything right, I say, are they maybe living down to your low expectations?
Whether you think they can or whether you think they can't, either way, you're right.
I love that. Beautiful, beautiful rendition of Henry Ford. Whether you think I can or I can't, I'm always right. And now you're saying as the leader, if you think they can or you can't,
or they
beautiful.
Can't. Huh?
That's what they will live up to or down to. Number 4.
So number 4 is equally important because inspiration is important. Now, inspiration, the root word of inspiration is actually in spirit. And what that means is when we are able to inspire each other, we tap into the highest sense of who we are.
Number 5.
So number 5 is very important. Title doth not a leader make. We mentioned Nelson Mandela. You could strip him of all his titles. We will always accept him as a leader. And then to other people, you can endow them with as many titles as you can. They would just never be set apart and be accepted as leaders. When I find that and I have done this before, so let me not plead, that I'm a saint. But I found that on those occasions where I've had to refer to my legal, rational authority, that I've lost it.
Edward Kieswetter, thank you so much for being on Gurus.